Welcome to Managing the Cycle of Escalating Behavior, Understanding and Responding. The primary purpose of this presentation is to provide information that will help you understand why behavior occurs and how to respond effectively. As we know, the display of challenging behavior is not limited to the classroom setting. Because of this, it will be important to share the information discussed during this session with all school staff, not just the classroom teachers. To begin, we will review the cycle of escalation. Then we will take a closer look at behaviors commonly displayed during each phase of the escalation cycle. Also, the importance of identifying environmental patterns surrounding challenging behavior will be discussed. Lastly, specific strategies to use during each phase of the escalation cycle will be outlined. Following this presentation, teams are encouraged to develop an action plan for training school staff on managing the cycle of escalating behaviors and responding to challenging behavior effectively. This image shows the basic model of escalation by Jeff Colvin. As you can see, there are 7 points identified throughout this cycle, ranging in duration and intensity. As you are viewing this image, you are probably thinking that this model does not accurately depict the cycle of escalation exhibited by some of the students in your building, and you are correct. Each person's escalation cycle follows the phases previously outlined, but uniquely. You see, there are certain variables or circumstances that may impact the intensity and/or duration of behavior at each phase. For example, consider situations that have triggered your own escalation cycle. Are there situations that cause you to escalate to the peak phase rapidly? Or maybe there are circumstances that prolong the agitation phase. Learning history, past experiences with specific people or in a specific setting, motivation, and other environmental factors are just a few variables that impact every person's escalation cycle. Now that we have learned the basics of escalation cycles, we can take a closer look at how this relates to the display of challenging behavior and effective management strategies. The most important thing to know about behavior is that it is learned. Have you ever heard the saying, everything happens for a reason? Well, that is true when it comes to behavior. All behavior, positive and challenging, serves a purpose for the individual. In order to change behavior, decrease challenging, and increase positive, we need to determine why the behavior is occurring in the first place. To do this, we need to take a closer look at the events surrounding the behavior. Here we have the ABCs of behavior. A stands for antecedent events, B indicates behavior, and C is for consequent events. Understanding the ABCs of a specific target behavior can be helpful when attempting to replace or change that particular challenging behavior. In further, identifying patterns in the ABCs can lead to predicting whether a particular response may increase or decrease the likelihood of a behavior happening again. If you are viewing this session with your team, please take a moment to pause this recording and discuss the following questions. 1. Who has behavior expertise at your school? 2. What kind of training have they received? 3. How do they share their expertise? Are they used as a resource? And if not, how may your team utilize them moving forward? Now let's review antecedents. An antecedent is any event that occurs immediately before the behavior. Keep in mind, this could also include what didn't happen before the behavior. Here are a few common antecedents. Teacher provides instruction to put materials away. Staff member leaves the classroom. Absence of attention or interaction. It will be important to make sure staff are accurately recording antecedent events using the office referral form.
This information is critical when developing a plan or intervention to address challenging behavior. Here we have the B of ABCs. B is for behavior. The important thing to remember about behavior is that it happens for a reason. The reason students continue to display challenging or disruptive behavior is because it works for them. It gets them something. In order to measure behaviors accurately, it is important to define and describe what the behavior looks like. It is important to know exactly when the behavior has occurred and when it has not. This is why we need to focus on what can be observed. For example, avoid targeting behaviors that are subject such as daydreaming or off-task. What does off-task look like specifically? Focus on behaviors you can see. Consequent events. Here we have the most important part of the ABCs. As I mentioned earlier, all behavior serves a purpose. We can start to hypothesize what that is by taking a close look for patterns in the events following a behavior. Remember, consequences are not the same as punishment. When we refer to consequences here, it means anything that happens immediately following a behavior. There are a few common examples listed on this slide. In most cases, the adult's behavior is the consequence. How we respond, what we say, and what we do is the consequence. We need to make sure that we are aware of how we respond so that we can accurately record the consequent events following a behavior. Identifying patterns in consequent events is the golden ticket to behavior change. This information tells us what purpose the behavior is serving. When we know why the behavior is happening, we can start to figure out how to change it. If you try to change a behavior before knowing the why, you are taking a shot in the dark. Here are a few examples. Let's say you have a student that is disruptive in class. You notice that after every disruption, you move closer, pull the student aside to talk, reprimand, etc. And the behavior is not going away. It would be reasonable to hypothesize that this student may be blurting out to get your attention. One proactive strategy to address this may involve providing more frequent but shorter amounts of attention. This may include more frequent eye contact, gestures like thumbs up, closer proximity, etc. And as we know, it is possible that the student may still be disruptive. So then what? Well, instead of ignoring, respond by indicating an alternative, more appropriate behavior that will get your attention. For example, I will be over to speak with you when you raise your hand, or I will come over to see you when you are sitting in your seat. Attention-seeking behaviors are so common in classrooms. When responding to challenging behavior that may be occurring to obtain attention, avoid trying to only ignore the behavior. It is important to try to minimize attention for the challenging behavior, but always specifically state an alternative behavior to get your attention. It is important to make sure that all staff receive training on how to complete the office referral form. It is also important for all staff to know how valuable this information is should additional support or an intervention be warranted. Providing accurate information on the referral form, specifically the possible motivation column, will provide the best opportunity at a successful intervention for the student. This column is the most important piece of information of the entire form. Again, if you are viewing this recording with your team, please take a moment to discuss the following questions. Do staff at your school have difficulty filling out the ODR form? What can you do to ensure this section is filled out correctly? To wrap up this section on the ABCs of behavior, remember, the antecedent patterns tell us how we can prevent challenging behavior from occurring. The consequent events tell us why the behavior is occurring and the function it serves for the individual. If there is one thing you take away from this presentation, remember, we do what we do because of what happens to us. Now that we have talked about why behaviors happen, let's go back to those escalation cycles and talk about what it means for effective behavior management. Here we have the escalation cycle model shown earlier. Instead of discussing specific behaviors and strategies for each of the 7 phases, we are going to group the phases according to the intensity of behaviors displayed. For example, our first category is calm behaviors, as indicated by the blue circle. This category includes the calm and recovery phases. Next, we have the precursor behaviors that occur during the trigger and agitation phase outlined in green. Lastly, there is the continuous and/or escalated behaviors. These tend to occur during the acceleration, peak, and de-escalation phases outlined in red.
This slide shows example behaviors that are displayed during the calm and recovery phases. The behaviors exhibited here are appropriate, cooperative, and positive. The focus here is on prevention and acquisition. This is a good time to provide opportunities to practice new skills and behaviors. Here are 4 strategies to consider during the calm phase. It is important to remember that talking about behavior is not enough. Students need opportunities to practice. Many times we have discussions with students about behavior and then just hope that when the situation occurs, the student will remember the discussion and respond accordingly. That's not always how it works. Let's think about it this way. If you only talk to a student about how to complete a math problem, and then do not provide an opportunity to practice that skill until the next day, will the student be successful at completing the math problem? Maybe, but probably not. Provide opportunities to practice behaviors and skills just as you do with academics. Now we will move on to talk about the precursor behaviors in the trigger and agitation phases. What are precursor behaviors? Well, they are also called junk behaviors. These are behaviors that may be disruptive or annoying, but they are not dangerous. Examples include blurting, refusal, and wandering. When students are at this point of escalation, it will be important to focus on preventing further escalation and redirection. It will be crucial at this point to specifically identify an alternative behavior that will receive the same outcome as the challenging behavior, as we discussed earlier with the attention example. Let's give another example for escape or avoidance behaviors. One strategy to try for a student that may be refusing to engage in an academic task would be to modify the initial presentation of the task. What does this mean? Well, instead of presenting the task as usual, ask the student to identify a selection of the work to complete initially. For example, go ahead and circle 3 of the problems to answer first. After completing those items, provide a brief positive interaction and encourage the student to circle several more, or ask the student if you can circle a few. The expectation should always be that the student completes the entire task. You are just breaking it up into smaller, more manageable sections. This strategy is effective because it decreases the amount of perceived effort required on the student's end. Then, after building some momentum and getting started, it is easier to finish the entire task. Here are a few more strategies to consider when students display precursor behaviors. See the handout for specific examples of these strategies. Our last section will review management strategies for continuous or escalated behaviors, often displayed in the acceleration, peak, and de-escalation phases. These behaviors are considered dangerous or have the potential to become dangerous. Examples include physical aggression, property destruction, and/or leaving school grounds. At this point in the escalation cycle, the focus is on safety. This is not the time to prompt alternative skills the student is working on. It will be important to have a general school-wide plan for when these behaviors occur. This can be done by establishing roles for the staff responding to the behavior. For example, identify who is responsible for clearing the room of dangerous items, who is in charge of data collection, how is communication relayed, etc. Here is an example video.
I appreciate y'all coming and have a conversation.
There's a lot we do within the building to create spaces that are conducive for de-escalation. Kids are able to remove themselves from a negative situation, process what has caused the crisis, and make different choices about how to move forward. Sometimes it's not the easiest thing in the world to tell a kid, I know all this is happening to you, I know all of this is going on, but I want you to learn. And so we are giving them a space and a context to process some of that emotion, to de-escalate, and then transition back to class. Many of our classrooms have what we call de-escalation spaces. So there'll be a beanbag in the corner or a curtain that allows you to step away, just something that creates a little bit of separation for kids that the teacher recognizes need that, or the student.
Students come to me, I greet them, and then I just give them alone time. And because they don't associate the space necessarily with academics, it's easier for them to utilize it outside of the classroom and recognize it as a safe space. For myself, when my emotions are high, it's best to calm down before I begin to try to communicate.
It's giving us the time to cool down, do the coloring. It gives me an opportunity to be like, okay, yeah, taking this breath, I can talk now without trying to cry. Just letting us do that makes it better. But
So then they'll begin to kind of share and open up about really what's bothering them. How was that?
it wasn't good.
We really try to teach our kids how to be resilient, how to utilize resources, and take care of themselves.
We have another space where our counselor is located
All right, so you go talk first. And when you get done, you go talk, okay?
who does real-time conflict resolution.
I didn't want to tell you who to hang with.
We can't expect people to just get along. We have to show them what getting along looks like.
You have an issue with a teacher, with another student, they come in my room, and we have a conversation like, hey, what happened? Today I had two students, they've been friends for about 2 or 3 years. They had a big old fight with another boy, and we stopped them from outside and brought them in. Yeah, both strong young men.
What is going to happen is knowing how I contributed to the conflict, right? And how to respond to you with empathy.
I wasn't solving it out the right way, so I should have communicated better.
We come to the table and say, hey, it ain't about you. It's about respecting each other.
We took it upon ourselves to go have a conversation with the other gentleman that was arguing, and then that's when we got everything solved.
When we have de-escalation spaces where we're teaching them to manage themselves, then we make it so that they can be successful anywhere. Saying just power through or white knuckle through something is not a strategy. When you say, I see you, I recognize you, and I'm going to teach you how to take that moment to walk away, recenter, and come back and do what you need to do, that's actually teaching resilience and grit.
When I just feel like I'm not doing something right and I just need a moment.
Finally, we will review the calm behaviors and strategies for the recovery phase. After a behavior episode, focus on returning to normal activities. Also, don't forget about prevention. We do not want to repeat the cycle. The focus should be on moving forward and providing opportunities for the student to be successful. Trying to punish or teach the student a lesson is not the best approach. So what should we do then? Well, here are some things to consider regarding effective consequences. Does the consequence Model, instruct, or teach a more appropriate behavior? What do you want the student to do differently next time? Does the consequence give the learner an opportunity to practice what to do next time? Does the consequence give the learner the opportunity to learn how to restore the relationship or repair harm? Remember, a debriefing session is only effective when the brain is back online. Have open conversation about the ABCs of the behavior episode with the student if they are able to understand. Helping them identify patterns may make potential situations to use replacement skills more salient. But don't forget, as mentioned earlier, talking is not enough. We have to teach replacement behaviors, and that involves practice. This is an ending slide to encourage adults to move away from traditional reactions to escalating behavior and shift to safer and more proactive positive strategies for managing escalating behavior. Here are a few takeaways from this session. Intervene early, stay calm, your response to behavior matters. Pay attention to what you are doing after challenging behavior is displayed. Lastly, do not forget to teach behavior. As your team works through the information presented during this session, start action planning by discussing the following items. In your building, who needs training? How and when will this training be provided? Lastly, how will you make sure that additional support is available following training?